Hello and welcome. In this 10th video of the series, we are starting with paper 1. We have already completed paper 2 and now it is the turn of paper 1. Paper 1 comprises of animal diversity in section A and it comprises of ecology, ethology, economic zoology, biostats and bioinstrumentation in section B. We are starting with section A, which has got invertebrate zoology and chordate zoology, including comparative anatomy. This area is extremely fascinating for both zoology and non-zoology students alike. You need to do it systematically, then you will not find it at all daunting as the popular perception is. Apart from that, this area happens to be very scoring. The students in our previous year's experience who take questions, 3 questions from section A, they end up scoring quite handsomely in paper 1, especially if they have done justice to this section. The key to score well in this section is to describe the structure or describe the biological features clearly with help of diagram and proper examples. If you can master the diagram, proper example with clear description, there is nothing else that the UPSC examiner will be expecting from you, and the examiner will not be shying from rewarding you very highly. So without wasting any time, let's get into the analysis of invertebrate zoology. This we have divided into 2 parts. Part 1 is going to deal with invertebrate zoology until Nemathelminthes, and part 2 of the invertebrate zoology discussion that we will be uploading next week will be dealing with the Annelida onwards, that will mean Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca and Echinodermata. Because this is not my area of teaching, this video has been done on invitation by a professor of Delhi University who has done deep analysis not only of the subject area but also into the trends of the examination. So here we go with an analysis of invertebrate zoology. And like always, I hope you will be finding this discussion enriching and meaningful to your preparation.
Hello everyone. With this video, we are beginning with the analysis of syllabus for Zoology Optional Paper 1 for Civil Services and Forest Services exam conducted by UPSC. Paper 1 of Zoology Optional can really be a deal breaker for many students, particularly those from a non-zoology background, as this part includes the diversity of animal world, which is non-chordata, chordata and comparative anatomy of vertebrates. Other topics are animal behavior, economic zoology, statistics and instrumentation method and ecology. So there is a really diverse syllabus for paper 1. But the key here is that the questions are quite predictable and there are hardly any surprises given from this part. So with this in-depth syllabus analysis, you will get an idea how to go about in your preparation for paper 1 zoology. So these are the major topics under paper 1. There is non-chordata and chordata. Chordata also includes comparative anatomy of vertebrates, which is a major part of the main topic. Then there is ecology, ethology, also known as animal behavior, economic zoology, biostatistics and instrumentation methods. Non-chordata and chordata are falling under section A of paper 1, while the rest of the topics are all included in section B. So you can understand that non-chordata, chordata, which is diversity of animal world, actually makes up major portion of paper 1 of your zoology optional. Section A and section B have 4 questions each, so the paper 1 in total has 8 questions, but you have to attempt 5 questions in total. Question number 1 and question number 5 from A and B section respectively are compulsory. Question number 1 and 5 actually have short notes which are generally of 10 marks and they are only 150 words, and so you have to be very precise in writing these short note answers. In this video, we will begin with the analysis of non-chordata part, and that too till phylum Nemathelminthes, because we will be going in absolute details of the syllabus. So other videos will cover the rest of the part. So now let's begin with the non-chordata portion. So these are the different topics under the main topic non-chordata. Here you have to do the diversity of non-chordates, that includes various phyla, and you have to study these phyla till subclasses. You can refer to any Indian author or foreign author book for classification, but wherever you are mentioning the classification, you have to write the author, you have to mention which classification you are describing here. And questions from classifications have been asked. Sometimes you do have to remember orders also. So for example, in Arthropoda, questions from winged and wingless insect Aterygota and Pterygota have been asked, and there you need to mention different orders of insects also. So certain orders in different phyla you have to remember, and as we proceed I will mention which are those orders. Then there is this topic of coelom, which is next. So under that you have to do acoelomates, pseudocoelomates and coelomates. So in non-chordates there is as well as chordates, there is a body cavity apart from the gut cavity, and that cavity is a true cavity if it is lined by mesoderm. So all those organisms which have the coelom lined by mesoderm, that they become coelomates. Annelida, Arthropoda, Mollusca, Echinodermata as well as Chordata, they are all true coelomates. And the Nemathelminths, there is a body cavity apart from the gut cavity, but that is not a derivative of mesoderm, so it is a pseudocoelomate, while Porifera, Cnidaria and Platyhelminths are acoelomate organism. Protozoa are unicellular and acellular. Then you have to describe that where during the division, from when the zygote is dividing and embryo is forming, there is a blastopore which appears. So if blastopore forms the mouth first, so proto means first and stoma means mouth. So that blastopore in an embryo, in a developing gastrula, if that is forming the mouth, those non-chordates or those animals in general, they will be called as protostomes. And deutero means later and stoma means mouth. So the blastopore in these animals forms the anus, while the mouth will develop later. So if we look at all the non-chordates, we will not be including protozoa while talking about coelom or the blastopore or the mouth. Porifera, Cnidaria, Platyhelminths, Nemathelminths, all these we are discussing. Annelida, Arthropoda, even Mollusca, all of them are protostomes. Deuterostomes are Echinodermata and then next Chordata. So in them blastopore will form anus and mouth will develop later. Then you have to study the symmetry, and on that basis in fact Whitaker had classified the kingdom Animalia. So bilatria are all those organisms which are having bilateral symmetry, and radiata are the ones which have radial symmetry. So Cnidaria is the phylum which has radial symmetry, and then there is a minor phyla, Ctenophora, which also has a radial symmetry. So when you talk about radiata, you study these two phylum. The rest of the animals are under bilatria because they have a largely bilateral symmetry. They may become asymmetrical at times, or they may have a superimposed pentaradial symmetry and other symmetries, but the larger plan is bilateral. Then individually, when you're studying all the different phyla, you have to do the status of certain taxons such as Protista, because this is the term which has been used in different classifications from the Three Kingdom onwards. There was a little idea of what protists are. So what is the present status of this taxon Protista? You have to discuss that. Parazoa is the sub kingdom which was classified, and this included the poriferans, because they are not considered true multicellular organisms because they do not have protoplasmic connections between the cells. So what is the status of that taxon? That will be the status of Parazoa. Onychophora is now a separate minor phyla, and it was considered a connecting link between Annelida and Arthropoda. So what is the status of Onychophora now? So we know that it is a phylum, and earlier it has been classified both in Annelida for its worm-like body as well as in Arthropoda for multiple reasons. So that is the status of Onychophora. Then Hemichordata, because Hemichordata was earlier classified under Chordata, presuming that it has a notochord, but later on it was found out that notochord is nothing but a buccal diverticulum, and the rest of the features are actually non-chordate features. So it was separated from chordata and put under non-chordata, though the syllabus still mentions it separately as the status of hemichordata. So you have to study it under non-chordata only. And symmetry is something which is again bilateral and radiata larger the classification when you are studying. Symmetry will also be included there. Symmetry also is other than bilateral and radial. There is the asymmetry also, and majority of the poriferans are asymmetrical, and there are many other animals which can be asymmetrical. Then there is the bilateral symmetry. Then there is radial symmetry, and under the radial symmetry there is also biradial symmetry which you have to look at. Ctenophores show biradial symmetry. There are only two planes in the body, which two planes through the body divide the body into equal halves. And then you have to also do a spherical symmetry. Spherical symmetry is something which is largely restricted to protozoans, and in protozoans specifically heliozoans show spherical symmetry. So any plane passing from the center of the body can divide the body into equal halves. So there are multiple planes not defined. While bilateral symmetry, there is only one single plane which divides the body into equal halves. So that is what you have to describe under symmetry. Many questions are asked from this first part, that is from classification, relationships till symmetry. Questions are also asked on minor and major phyla. That is very important question which has been asked multiple times. The question is generally a short note, so you can do 2 or 3 minor phyla, such as you can do Rotifera, you can study Acanthocephela, and if you study these 1 or 2 minor phyla, and why there is a need to separate the major and minor phyla, because there is largely a lot of things are unknown in the minor phyla, while all these phyla here, they are all the major phyla. So Rotifera, Acanthocephela, Nematomorpha, these are all the minor phyla which are represented by less number of species and very ill-known phyla. So you can compare, the questions have been asked on differentiate between minor and major phyla, or write a short note on minor phyla, explain any one, something like that. So you can at least prepare 2 or 3 minor phyla, and then you are prepared for that kind of question. Coming to protozoa, so protozoa is not a phylum anymore. It doesn't have the status of a phylum. In fact, it is just an assemblage of various phyla, which includes coeliophores, which includes mastigophores and all those. So you have to do the classification accordingly. And under protozoa, classification is one very important thing you have to deal with, and then you have to in detail go about in the study of how different protozoans they move. So how do they do locomotion? So they have different locomotory apparatus. They may have a cilia, they may have a flagella, they may move using pseudopodia. So all these flagellates will have flagella, The ciliates will have cilia, there may be pseudopodia, and then within it there may be different categories under flagella, under cilia, and here also you have to compare flagella and cilia. You also have to do their ultrastructure and also the ultrastructure of the cilia and flagella. Not only that, but also the ultrastructure of the basal granule, so that you also have to study and give a detailed account. Then under pseudopodia there are philopodia, lobopodia, and different kinds of pseudopodia. With the examples you have to study that also. Locomotion can also be through general contraction and relaxation of the body, and thus myonemes is something which you have to also study under locomotion. So these are all the topics you have to deal with in detail. Then under nutrition you have to describe the different types, that is, some protozoans can be autotrophic, others can be heterotrophic, saprophytic, or parasitic, with examples, how they procure their food, how they ingest. In case of heterotrophs you have to describe that. Under reproduction, the main two categories are asexual and sexual reproduction. But under asexual, then you further have to describe fission, which can be the transverse fission or the longitudinal fission or oblique fission, then gemmation or spore formation or the budding or regeneration. All these are the categories with examples you have to describe. Under sexual reproduction, conjugation is really important, and in detail all these steps, particularly with respect to Paramecium caudatum, you have to describe that individually, each stepwise, and questions separately on conjugation in Paramecium has also been asked. Then you can describe autogamy and other different types of sexual reproduction. Then there is a topic called as evolution of sex. So that is how you have to describe how in protozoans sexual reproduction came to be, that there is a sort of these different types of individuals, where one can be mate type and then there is another mate type. So from asexual reproduction, how that sexual reproduction and then eventually the sex evolved, you have to describe that. So that is an evolutionary process which eventually led to multicellularity and then led to the development of rest of the phylum. Then there are certain specimens which you have to study their life cycle, and that includes Paramecium, Monocystis, Plasmodium, and Leishmania. Plasmodium is very important. Here it is the causative organism for malaria, and that topic is also covered under economic zoology. So if you do it nicely in this part along with life cycle, what are the different symptoms of the disease and how the disease progresses, what are the medicines and treatment available, what is the preventive measure. So you have actually covered one topic of economic zoology as well. Then there is Leishmania. So they are all different protozoans. Leishmania is a flagellate. Plasmodium is a sporozoan. Monocystis is also a sporozoan, and Paramecium is a ciliate. So by giving all these, for example, different types of protozoans are actually covered. So in detail, the life history has to be done, which may include certain morphological features also, and that may include how they ingest food, how they reproduce, how they move locomotory organelles, and all those details. In Paramecium, you also have to focus on infraciliary system, that is the system below the cilium. So individual cilium can further have beyond the basal granule, can also further have kinetodisma. So that is what you have to study under the infraciliary system. Monocystis is the parasite of earthworms. You have to study this life cycle with respect to earthworms. Plasmodium is the causative organism of malaria, and it is a digenetic parasite, so it completes its life cycle in humans as well as in the female Anopheles mosquito. So all the different stages are very important. In fact, in protozoa, plasmodium topic is really very important. A lot of questions from the asexual phase of the cycle to sexual phase and a complete life cycle as well as pathogenicity of the disease have been asked. Leishmania is a flagellate, causes the Kala Azar, and there are two stages in the life cycle. And you have to study the different types of leishmaniasis, which is the visceral, cutaneous, and mucocutaneous leishmaniasis. So that has to be dealt with in detail. The next topic is phylum Porifera, and with this there is the beginning of multicellular organisms or metazoans. Though Porifera has always been classified under Parazoa separately, so the status of Parazoa is something you have to prepare for in this section. Though Parazoa may not hold the status of a taxon, but it's still a term used defining poriferans, because poriferans do not have protoplasmic connections between the cells. So each cell is individually working and doing all the functionalities individually, and thus they are not a true multicellular organism. So thus Parazoa have been classified. Who classified it, who used the term first, and that will, all those will be included under status of Parazoa. Then coming to skeleton. The skeleton is of two types, spicules and spongin fibers, and on that basis only include the skeleton as well as canal system poriferans have been classified. There are only three classes: Calcarea, Hexactinellida, and Demospongia mainly, and then there are subclasses you have to prepare with examples. And one thing to note here is that classification question has been asked in Porifera. It is one of the simplest classifications, so it's very easy for you to prepare it. In skeleton, there can be different types of spicules, and there is only one type of spongin fibers, and Demosponge only have spongin fibers. Demospongia, which are the largest sponges. So Demospongia have spongin fibers, while Calcarea and Hexactinellida under Porifera have spicules. Though they do not make up a proper skeleton, but they actually provide shape to the body and prevent from any predation. So that you have to describe. So under spicules there are microscleres and megascleres. Micro are very small, mega are little larger in size, and then on the basis of shape also they have been classified along with diagrams. If you are describing shape, you have to give the diagrams also, so that will cover all the topic of skeleton system. You have to also describe the cells which give rise to these spicules, and explain how a monoaxon or triaxon spicule is formed. So that is very important, so remember that. So you have to prepare how a monoaxon spicule is formed and how a triaxon spicule is formed. That is also something you should include. Then canal system is a very important question in Porifera. There are three major types of canal system. There is the basic ascon, then there is the cycon, and then there is leucon. And then the cycon and leucon have further types. So canal system is actually doing all the functions in a poriferan body. There is a specialized cell in the body of a poriferan, that is the collar cell or choanocyte, and it is having a flagellum, and because of the beating of the flagellum there is a current generated in the body which causes the water to move from outside of the body into the body, and then it exits again from the osculum. So there are two pores in Porifera. One are the smaller but large in number ostia, and then there is generally one, but there can be many, and large in size but lesser in number, that is osculum. So the water enters into the body through ostia and exits through osculum, and that is created because there is a current generated inside due to choanocyte. You have to remember the structure of choanocyte is very important. You have to do that. This question has been asked on that. And whenever you're describing canal system, you have to draw the diagram of a choanocyte. So a detailed account of all the canal systems and the route of water flow in all of them is something you need to prepare. And then comes reproduction, both sexual as well as asexual reproduction. You have to deal here, and here you have to really remember the diagram of gemule and how they are forming, and you also have to remember the reduction bodies, and a comparison between the two is something you should be doing. These are both under asexual reproduction. The sponges can form gemmules or they can form reduction bodies also. Different types of cells under poriferans also something you should learn. There is one choanocyte, but there is one archaeocyte which can form any cell in the body. There can be amoebocytes. All these different cells you have to take an account of that also. So that is something which will be helpful in describing different processes in porifera. Then comes the next phylum, that is Cnidaria, that has been named on because of the presence of a specialized cell called as cnidoblast. Cnidaria has also been referred as coelenterata, but this is not a term which is anymore used. Coelenteron is the gastrovascular cavity. On that basis they were named, and they also included the ctenophores when the phylum Coelenterata was there, but now they have been separated. There is one phylum Cnidaria with specialized stinging cells called as cnidoblasts, while there is another ctenophore also which also has a coelenteron, but they do not have cnidoblasts. So polymorphism is a very important topic, because under Cnidaria there are there is a very important phenomena that is called as metagenesis. Metagenesis is that there are two main forms in the life cycle. One is polyp and the other is medusa, and polyp reproduces asexually to form medusa, and medusa reproduces sexually to form polyp, and that is something which is known as a alternation of generation or metagenesis. So individually this polyp can have multiple structures which have different functionalities. So one may be working for just reproduction, the other may be working for only ingestion and digestion, the third one may be another hard structure made up of very spiky cuticles, and they may be again meant for protection of the colony. So these different morphs in a body creates something called as polymorphism. So you have to describe under polymorphism the main two forms, polyp and medusa, and then different structures within a polyp and within a medusa. Then defensive structures are cnidoblasts, and in cnidoblasts the Golgi apparatus modifies into a structure called as nematocyst, which is a stinging apparatus inside this stinging cell called cnidoblast. So there are different categories on the basis of what kind of cnidoblast it is and how it actually functions, whether it is meant for releasing any venom or whether it is meant only for catching and attaching to the prey, and likewise. So there are different types of cnidoblasts. You have to deal that under defensive structure, and also how they work in terms of whenever the cnidocyll is disturbed. So this is how the structure of a cnidoblast is. There is this cell which has this needle called as cnidocyll, and whenever this needle is disturbed, the covering, the operculum, is uncovered, and from that the nematocyst erupts out. So how that happens? Because of the water entering inside the cnidoblast due to disturbance of cnidocyll. You have to describe the mechanism also. Very important. Very many times the questions have been asked. Then comes the really important and environmentally very significant topic, the coral reefs, their formation, and here you should include the threats they are facing as well. So there are main three types of coral reefs. There is the fringing reef, the barrier reef, and the atoll. But here you have to also describe what is a coral polyp and how a coral polyp can give rise to over millions of years to a coral reef. So that is to be described. An individual coral polyp diagram has to be given. Also you have to describe which cnidarians form coral reefs. So under cnidaria, again the classification is very simple. There are only three classes. There is the hydrozoa, scyphozoa, and anthozoa. So scyphozoa are jellyfishes, so they do not form coral reefs at all. Some of the hydrozoans and a lot of anthozoans are responsible for formation of coral reefs, and all those which are forming, all those coral polyps which are forming coral reefs are called as hermatypic, but those polyps which are not as such a part of formation, they are called as ahermatypic. So you have to describe within the coral polyps these two types. Then there are two specimens you have to study. One is Obelia, which belongs to the class Hydrozoa, and the other is Aurelia, which belongs to class Scyphozoa. You have to deal with their life cycle in detail, and with that you have to understand what is metagenesis, which is alternation of generation of or alternating in the life cycle between polyp and medusa stages. So that has to be done, dealt with in detail. And while you are, when a question on metagenesis is asked, you can choose between describing Obelia or Aurelia. I would say you should prefer Aurelia in describing metagenesis, because it is a true metagenesis in terms of that the polyp is only reproducing asexually while the medusa is reproducing properly sexually. So that is something which you have to deal with. One more thing which I should tell, that the gastrovascular cavity in Aurelia is so it is made up of multiple canals, and they join together and open again into the mouth. So the canal system in Porifera and the canals in Aurelia are two separate things. You should not be confused in that. Whenever canal system specifically for Aurelia is asked, then only describe it. Otherwise, canal system is a question pertaining to the phylum Porifera. And then there is the ctenophores, which you also need to prepare. So phylum Ctenophora, a general account, few examples, and the biradial symmetry in them is something you should prepare. And a question in forest services on this topic of Ctenophora for 8 marks has been asked. So particularly for forest services, this is a separate topic you need to prepare. But here also, in even for civil services exam, Ctenophora can be considered under minor phyla, so you should prepare that. They have specialized cells called as coloblasts, so you should prepare the diagram of that coloblast cell, few examples of ctenophores, and what kind of body system they have, and they have tentacles, some also lack tentacles, and what are comb plates, something you should prepare here. Then we begin with the next phylum, Platyhelminths, and from here starts the Bilatria. So you have to also, before beginning with Platyhelminths, you have to do origin of Bilatria. There are many theories given on how from a radial ancestor a bilateral organism developed, and then they diversified and formed the rest of the animal kingdom. So origin of Bilatria is something you should study. Platy actually means flat, and helminths means worms. So Platyhelminths phylum includes flatworms. Here there are 3 germ layers. There is ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. So that is also happening for the first time. Porifera and Cnidaria are diploblastic organisms, so they only have ectoderm and endoderm separated by a mesenchyme or mesoglia. But here, for the first time, mesoderm appears, but still they are acoelomate. There is no body cavity apart from the gut cavity. All there is tissue filled in the rest of the part. So you have to here focus on the classification. Question on classification in platyhelminths has also been asked. You also have to focus on pseudo-metamerism here, although that is something separately dealt with in Annelida. But certain platyhelminths such as Taenia solium or the ribbon worms, they have a sort of body divided into multiple segments, but they are not true segments. So they are the proglottids, and that is something we call as pseudo-metamerism. So that is also something you need to prepare. Platyhelminths are free living, but a lot of them are parasitic, and they are parasitic on humans or the livestock. So you have to do all the parasitic adaptations, whether they have suckers, whether they have hooks, or they are largely dependent on an anaerobic condition in their body because they are residing inside a host, and that they produce large number of eggs, and that they show polyembryony. This is something you have to do under parasitic adaptations. And then you have to describe the life histories, study the life histories of two. One is Fasciola hepatica, and the other is Taenia solium, along with the pathogenic symptom. Fasciola hepatica is a digenetic parasite, so it is the liver fluke, which has the main host, that is sheep, and then there is an intermediate host, which is a snail. And you have to describe all the larval stages. They are very important. The larval stages start from miracidium, then there is sporocyst, then there is the rhedia, there is cercaria, and there is metacercaria. All the diagrams are very important, and the different larval stages, and what one which gives rise to the next one, that is also something very important here. Then under Taenia solium, the important is, one is proglottids. What are the different types? The immature, mature, and gravid proglottis. The other is scolex. Scolex is an important part which is meant for attachment into the host gut. It is not head. Actually, in Taenia solium, the body is divided into scolex, neck, and strobila, and strobila region contains many proglottids. So scolex question has been asked for 8 marks on just scolex. Scolex consists of hooks and suckers, and hooks are typically in a part which is called as rostellum, and there are 2 rows of hooks in rostellum. The inner row has larger hooks, the outer row has smaller hooks. So you have to describe the structure of the hook and the 2 different types of hooks. And then there are suckers also. There are 4 suckers in Taenia solium. And Taenia saginata, which is the beef tapeworm, does not have any rostellum or the hooks, but it has 4 suckers. So on that basis you can prepare an 8 mark answer along with diagram, because that question has been asked. Under proglottids, you have to describe the immature, mature, and gravid proglottids. The comparison between the immature, mature, and gravid, specifically between mature and gravid proglottids, is also very important. Here in Taenia, the other topic which is very important is the oncosphere, and then the other the larval forms. Within the oncosphere there is the hexacanth larva, and when the hexacanth larva is ingested, oncosphere containing hexacanth larva is ingested by the pig, it develops into the next stage, which is the bladder worm or the cysticercus larva. Then this cysticercus larva travels through the digestive tract, and then eventually reaches and settles in the muscles. And then when we eat pork, and specifically that pig which was infected by the cysticercus larva, and thus that pork is called as measly pork, then we ingest the cysticercus larva, and then that eventually hatches into the adult, develops into the adult, and then that attaches using its scolex into the gut. So that is what you have to describe here. So all the oncosphere, hexacanth larva, cysticercus. These stages are all you have to study under Taenia. Then the diseases which both of these parasites cause, under Taenia you don't have to just study Taeniasis, but cysticercosis is also important. So all the pathogenic symptoms of these diseases you also have to deal with, and here you can also study different types of medicines and curative measures which are taken to prevent these diseases. Fasciola can also infect humans as well, though the main primary host remains sheep or goat. But if we somehow ingest the Metacercaria larva of a fasciola, we can also get infected. So how that happens, because we might feed on certain aquatic plants, and then that way we can also ingest Metacercaria. So you have to describe the symptoms with respect to livestock as well as with respect to humans. Then the next phylum is phylum Nemathelminths. Phylum Nemathelminths is one of the classes in the now redundant phylum Aschelminthes. Aschelminthes included all the pseudocoelomates, but under Aschelminthes there were different classes. Nematoda is now the phylum Nemathelminths. The other classes have now got the status of a phylum as well, and they are all minor phyla. So Nemathelminths, here they are also triploblastic organisms, so they have ectoderm, endoderm and a mesoderm. But for the first time here in Nemathelminths, there is an appearance of a body cavity apart from the gut cavity. So there is a coelom, but that coelom is not fully lined by mesoderm, so it doesn't make it a true coelom. So Nemathelminths have pseudocoelom, and other minor phyla which are Rotifera and Acanthosyphila, which were earlier classified in Aschelminthes, they are all pseudocoelomates. So classification is very simple on the basis of sense organs, which are phasmids. They have been divided into aphasmidia and phasmidia. Very simple classification. A lot of them can be parasitic, and they are parasitic to humans, and two of those specimens you have to study. One is the Ascaris and the other is Wuchereria, which is a filarial worm. So general features of Ascaris and Wuchereria, life history and parasitic adaptations you have to deal with. Also here sexual dimorphism is very important. Females are generally larger in size and males are smaller in size, and reproductive system of both is also very important. Transverse section of male and female Ascaris diagram has been asked as a question in exam, so you have to keep that in mind, that you have to prepare TS of Ascaris, male as well as female. Reproductive structures of both of them are also very important. Then in the life history, you have to describe the different stages, different larval stages as well, and how the infection proceeds. Ascaris lumbricoides is the species which is the only host it has is humans, so whole life cycle is completed in humans. And how the pathogenicity is, or how the parasite moves about in the host body, that is also something you have to deal with in Ascaris. Then Wuchereria on the other hand, which is a filarial worm, very thin, very thread-like worm. It is carried by a vector, that is a mosquito, and in this case it is the Culex, Cunci fasciatus, which is the species, in case of India specifically. So it causes a disease called as Wuchereriasis, which is sometimes also known as elephantiasis, which is something in Wuchereriasis when the lymph vessels, they are swollen, then the lower part of the body can become swollen, and that causes the appearance of a large foot, and that is why Wuchereriasis in later stages develop into elephantiasis. So that is something you have to deal with, and you have to also do the microfilariae, which is the larval stage in case of Wuchereria. The diagram of that also is very important. Then the control here, very important drug, ivermectin, and other drugs also you can mention. How the control of these nematodes happen, and they can affect lot of them are parasitic to humans, not just Ascaris and Wuchereria. There is Dracunculus, there is Loa Loa. There are many examples of nematodes which are infectious to humans. So basically you have to do the life cycle and any larval stage in between, and also you have to study the parasitic adaptations and prevention as well as pathogenicity of the disease. One more thing which you have to understand is that specifically in non-chordata chordata, although diagrams are important throughout in the zoology optional, but in non-chordata and chordata there are many diagrams you have to prepare, and and understanding of the subject comes only with the practice of diagrams. So while you're studying, I would suggest that you focus in lot of drawings by yourself. You just don't have to look at the diagram, you should draw it yourself and mark all the parts, and that way you will remember the topic also very well. Clean diagrams, not a lot of decoration is needed, but clean, even if it's a pencil diagram or a pen diagram you make in the exam, has to be very clean and understandable, and the handwriting should be legible, and that is all what is needed. So that is it for today. We will be discussing from Annelida onwards in the next video. Thank you so much.